It was a Tuesday night, around 11 p.m. in 2013, and I was walking down a dimly lit street at night on my way home from work. My car had been in the shop, so I'd been forced to walk 3 miles home every day. The walk was barely an hour, so I was home before midnight. I live in a small town in southern Indiana, so after 10 there's rarely any cars on the road. The only vehicles you ever see are truckers heading to Indianapolis. I was about a mile into the walk when I turned on a dirt road. My house was off the beaten path, so I had to take all these dirt roads surrounded by a forest to get there. As I was turning, I heard the sound of a motor in the distance, and it was getting closer very slowly. I saw about a quarter mile down the stretch of road. I just turned off of a van moving very slowly without its lights. At first, this didn't strike me as out of place due to the fact that the town I live in there is a pretty cheap car dealership that sells used cars and vans with broken parts like broken headlights. So I just assumed this guy was one of their clients. I kept walking down the side road with the van still going slowly down the main road. About 5 seconds later, I jumped when I heard the sound of the van roar, and it sped up really fast, except now it had its lights on. I was startled, but not worried. This was until the van got closer to the turn for the side road, about 500 feet away from the turn. The van turned off its lights again and slowly slowed down. Now I was officially creeped out. I didn't want to seem startled, so I just walked faster down the road. I kept turning back constantly to see if I was being followed. Then my suspicions became reality as I saw the van turn onto the dirt road. I was only about 500 feet from the van, so I started to walk a lot faster. I didn't want to look back, but I did, just to be safe. And what I saw frightened every bone in my body. I saw the van there stopped with both the passenger and driver's doors open. At this point, I ran for my life down the dirt road. I heard what I'm positive was a gunshot not far away, and I really thought this was how I was going to die. I made a quick turn into one of the surrounding forests and hid behind a big rock. I heard what sounded like a middle-aged man not far away say, "I think she went into the woods." And then, to my horror, what sounded like 3 young girls with one of them responding, "Okay, sir, they'll see if we can. Find her now." I wasn't fearing for my life. I was worrying I was going to be forced into whatever sick group this was. I was covering my mouth, trying not to make any sound, when I heard the man say, "Whoever finds her doesn't have to drink the blood tonight." A million thoughts ran through my head. Is this some sort of satanic cult? Are these girls kidnapped? Will I become one of them? I spent what felt like an eternity sitting behind a rock, being scared of any sound that I could hear. Then, to my relief, I heard cop sirens nearby. I stayed there just to be safe. When I felt the courage to look from behind the rock, I saw red and blue lights right outside the forest. I ran out screaming for help, and the cops came to me and said, "Mom, do you know about this body?" I was confused and said, "What body?" Then I saw in front of the cop car the most gruesome thing I will ever see. It was what looked like a naked young woman, gutted blood everywhere. There was no van in sight. I then explained everything to the cops: the car, the man, the girls who had to drink the blood. The cops said they'd look into it and were nice enough to drive me home. That night when I couldn't sleep, I looked out my window to see the van, the same one from before, driving slowly without its lights on down my street. This time I was smart and wrote down the license plate. I called the cops immediately and told them what I saw and gave the license plate number, as expected. When the cops came, the van was long gone. "But what they told me is what will horrify me to this day," the cops said. "We checked the license plate number. It's a plate registered in South Dakota. But the thing is, we checked with other precincts around the country, and they've gotten reports tonight that there was also a suspicious van with that license plate, one in Vermont, one in Nevada, one in Alaska, and one in Texas. They said, we'll call you if we get any more information." The cops left and I never got a call. I don't really believe in the paranormal, so my best guess is that it was some sort of cult that used fake license plates to do their sick things all across the country. But I guess I'll never know. I moved out of Indiana, and now I make sure when I see something suspicious, I bolt. Every night you sit in the comfort and peace of your home, unaware of what is going on outside in the darkness. In that darkness, where the place is so dark, you can't help but feel lonely. You may not know it, but all across the country, in small and large cities, there are many such places. When I was a boy, I lived in a small town, and there was a person named Johnny Craig who lived near the street where I lived. I was friends with his older brother, and he was just a little child at the time. I watched him grow up, but I didn't pay much attention to him. Sometimes in the evening, my mother would send me to the far-off store in town to buy a can of milk or a bag of sugar. On the way to the store, I had to pass through a long, extremely dark path. During the day, that path was just a shaded place with old trees. I wasn't afraid of that path during the day, but at night, it was a different place. It was a place that made you feel extreme loneliness, a place inhabited by darkness and estrangement, a place of horror and fear. I always kept my eyes focused in all directions, thinking that someone would attack me at any moment in that darkness and the absolute silence of the place. Every time I had to pass through that place at night, I felt dread. I hoped that someone would come along the way so I wouldn't have to walk alone, but no one came. Every time I walked along that stretch of darkness on the road, I tried to keep my eyes fixed on the trees, expecting to see something or someone lurking in the darkness. My mother often told me about that scary man, how he waited in dark places for wayward boys and girls who strayed from the path. Perhaps he preyed on children. My mother also warned me about wicked men who tried to lure children with promises of candy. And maybe it was something else, something worse. I wasn't sure what I expected to see hiding in that place alone in the night. My imagination always pictured the worst, and what I imagined in my mind was a strange creature somewhere between an animal and a man. It was tall, with huge sharp claws, thin, and its eyes burned like fire. I imagined it might be hiding in the branches of those old trees, silently dropping down and pursuing unwanted boys and girls who passed along the dark road at night. One night, almost that same thing happened to me. I was walking on the wild path, and suddenly, there was no light within sight. Then I knew he was coming, and I felt he was waiting there in the darkness. I couldn't feel my feet as I ran and ran, unable to stop from sheer terror. I felt he was behind me, his breath on my neck, and I kept running, thinking my heart would burst from its pounding. Finally, I managed to get away and made it safely back home. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a long tear in the back of my shirt, as if it had been made by a sharp claw. It was then that I realized the extent of the danger. I went to my mother and told her, but she didn't believe me. I told her that someday I might not come back when I went to that path. She laughed, saying it wasn't as dangerous as I imagined. But I didn't give up. I told her I was sure there was something in the darkness. Her only response was that if there was nothing in the light, there was nothing in the darkness. I sat there thinking to myself, what do adults know about the world? They think they know everything. They put their trust in what they read, but they only read what is said in newspapers and on TV. They never have to walk in the darkness of the road. They don't know what goes on there in the darkness, where there is never light to shine at any time, and darkness hovers over the ground like a cloud. There isn't a singing bird at any time. I knew they wouldn't believe me, and I didn't know what I could say to convince them that something or someone lived there among the trees. As I grew older, I gradually forgot all about that path. I went to high school, started playing football, learned to drive, and the years I went through in one way or another made me forget the thing that haunted me there in the darkness, but it remained in a distant corner of my memory. Years passed, but I never thought about the other children who had to walk down that dark path alone at night. But 3 days ago, Johnny Craig went missing, and they found him in the dark path between the trees along the darkness, his body torn. The police said that the attack resembled the work of animals to a great extent. The moment I heard about this incident, everything came flooding back to me. I knew what had happened. Johnny Craig was killed by the thing I had conjured up in my childhood fears. It was the creature I had imagined in my mind. After that, the police cut down the trees and put lights along the entire stretch of that road. The road wasn't dark anymore, and the thing that used to live there had now gone to another place, where people are uneasy, to another small town where it will wait again, just as it did here. It will wait for the scared little boy or the terrified girl to come to it. It's just a matter of time.